Rome, February 17th, 1600. A man is standing in the middle of Campo dei Fiori, chained to an iron pole, surrounded by a crowd that has gathered not to celebrate, but to watch something burn. His name is Giordano Bruno, and before the fire is lit, the executioners do something revealing. They put an iron device over his mouth to prevent him from speaking. Not just from screaming, from speaking. Think about that for a second. They are about to burn this man alive, and their greatest fear is not his body. Their greatest fear is his words, his last words. Because the institution that ordered his death understood something that most people today have completely forgotten. That certain ideas, once spoken aloud and heard by a prepared mind, cannot be unheard. They spread, they replicate, they are immune to fire. Bruno's crime was not murder. It was not theft. It was not treason. Bruno looked at the night sky and said what the initiates had whispered in secret for thousands of years. The universe is infinite. Consciousness is the foundation of reality, and every single human being carries within them the power to shape existence itself. They silenced his mouth with iron. But here you are, centuries later, listening, which means the fire failed. The truth survived. What you are about to receive in this audiobook is not a modern self-help system. It is not internet philosophy or motivational content dressed up in spiritual language. This is the Codex of the Silenced. It is the compiled, distilled, and reconstructed body of Gnostic, Hermetic, and alchemical wisdom that has been systematically hunted, erased, ridiculed, and suppressed for over 2,000 years. And before we go one step further, I need you to ask yourself a brutally honest question. Why would anyone spend 2 millennia trying to destroy a set of ideas? Why were the Cathars of southern France not just defeated, but annihilated? Men, women, children, entire villages exterminated. Why was the Library of Alexandria not just closed, but burned? Why were the Knights Templar not just disbanded, but tortured and executed? Academic historians give you geopolitical answers, power struggles, economic interests, religious competition. And yes, all of that is true on the surface. But underneath the surface, underneath the politics and the bloodshed, there is a single, terrifying, simple answer. Because this knowledge makes you ungovernable. Full stop. The system, call it the matrix, call it society, call it the consensus reality that you were born into without being asked, operates on a foundational premise that it needs you to believe with your entire being. The premise is this: you are small. You are a creature of circumstance. Reality is something that happens to you, not something you generate. You need intermediaries, priests to speak to God on your behalf, politicians to manage your freedom on your behalf, experts to interpret your own body and mind on your behalf. You are, at your core, a dependent being in a world you did not make and cannot change. That is the operating system of control. And Forbidden Metaphysics is the virus that crashes it. Because what these silenced traditions all point toward, from entirely different cultures, languages, and centuries, is the same staggering conclusion. Reality is not external. Reality is not solid. Reality is not something that happens to you. Reality is mental, and you are the mind generating it. When Bruno said the universe is infinite and God lives within the mind of every human being, he was not speaking theology. He was speaking code. He was describing the architecture of existence itself. And the institution that burned him knew exactly what he meant, which is why they were so desperate to stop him from saying it out loud. Now it is being said to you, directly, without filter, without apology. Throughout this codex, we are going to dismantle the structures of your reality one by one, not to leave you in chaos, but to rebuild your understanding on a foundation of actual power. We are going to speak about the veil of Maya, the ancient doctrine of perceptual illusion that modern quantum physics has stumbled into by accident and doesn't quite know what to do with. We are going to excavate the concept of the sleeping God, the terrifying and liberating truth that you are not a creature made of clay who received the gift of life, but a fragment of infinite consciousness that chose to forget itself in order to have an experience. We are going to master the hidden scribe, the subconscious architecture that is right now, at this very moment, projecting the film of your life onto the screen of reality based on programming that was installed in you before you were old enough to consent to any of it. We are going to learn alchemical fire, the forbidden technology of emotional transmutation, the art of taking the densest, darkest fuel of human experience and converting it into raw, creative power. We are going to study the law of the mirror, the metaphysical mechanics behind why your external world is an exact and merciless reflection of your internal state, and how changing the reflection requires changing the projector, never the screen. And at the end of all of it, we are going to look death itself in the eye and understand why the fear of non-existence is the single greatest weapon that has ever been used to keep an awakened being asleep. But I need to warn you, and I say this not to frighten you, but out of genuine respect for your intelligence. This knowledge comes with a price. The price is responsibility. Once you truly understand how reality works, once you see the mechanism clearly, you lose the luxury of victimhood forever. You can never again fully believe that your circumstances are someone else's fault. You can never again genuinely outsource your suffering to luck, to fate, to the economy, to your childhood, to the stars. Because once you see that you are the projector, every image on the screen becomes your creation. And for the human ego, which has been comfortably hiding behind the story of "I am a victim of this world" for decades, that realization is more painful than any physical fire. If you are looking for comfort, close this audio right now. There is no shame in that. This material is not for everyone, and it has never been intended to be. But if something in your bones has been restless, if you have felt for years that the story they sold you about who you are and what is possible is a cardboard replica of something much larger, if you have looked at the world and felt that nagging sense that the veil is thin and something real is trembling behind it, then you are ready. You have always been ready. You just needed someone to say it first. The flames of the Inquisition have long gone cold. The ashes have settled. But the voice of the silenced is still alive, still breathing, still reaching for ears that are prepared to hear it. Your ears, right now. Let us begin. The room you are sitting in right now is a lie, not a metaphor, not a poetic exaggeration, a literal, functional, operating lie. The walls, the floor, the device in your hand or near your ear, your own body, your own hands, none of it is what it appears to be. And the most extraordinary thing about this lie is not that it exists, but that it has been confirmed, not by mystics and heretics, not by alchemists burning midnight oil in secret chambers, but by the most rigorous, peer-reviewed, reluctant to admit it institution on the planet, modern physics. But long before the physicists caught up, the initiates already knew. From the banks of the Ganges to the stone temples of Egypt, from the hermit caves of Tibet to the underground lodges of Renaissance Europe, those who managed to penetrate behind the stage of consensus reality arrived at the same conclusion across thousands of years of independent investigation. The physical world is not solid. It is not primary. It is not the foundation of existence. It is the theater. It is the shadow. It is the echo. The ancient sages of India called it Maya, the great cosmic illusion. The Gnostics, who were hunted to near extinction in the first centuries of the Common Era, called it the error, the prison of matter, the world below the world. Plato encoded it in his allegory of the cave. Prisoners chained since birth in a dark underground chamber, watching shadows projected on the wall by an unseen fire behind them, convinced that those flickering outlines are the whole of reality, because they have never seen anything else. You are that prisoner, not as an insult, as a diagnosis. And this is the first hammer blow against the chains. To engage with forbidden metaphysics at the level it deserves, not as intellectual entertainment, but as operational truth, you must first accept the most structurally uncomfortable premise of all. Your senses were not designed to show you reality. They were designed to hide most of it from you. Your eyes capture an almost insultingly small slice of the electromagnetic spectrum. You cannot see radiation. You cannot see infrared. You cannot see ultraviolet. You cannot see the vital frequencies emanating from living organisms. You see surfaces. You see edges. You see separation. And from that wildly incomplete data set, your brain constructs a convincing simulation of solidity, permanence, and isolation that it then presents to you as the real world. When you touch a table and feel hardness, your brain is telling you solid, real, immovable. But if you could see that table with the resolution of quantum mechanics, you would see that it is 99.999% empty space. You would see atoms, themselves almost entirely void, vibrating at extraordinary frequencies, their electron clouds generating electromagnetic fields that repel the electron clouds in your fingertips, creating the sensation of resistance that your brain labels as solid. What you call touching is two force fields refusing to merge. Matter is not a thing. Matter is a relationship between energies moving at different rates. And this is not philosophy. This is physics. Now here is where this stops being a fascinating science fact and starts being personally, radically relevant to your life. If you believe the world is solid, you will experience it as immovable. You will look at your financial situation and see a concrete wall. You will look at your health and see a fixed biological sentence. You will look at your relationships and see established patterns that cannot shift. But if you genuinely internalize, not just intellectually nod at, but metabolize into your operating assumptions, that solidity is a trick of perceptual bandwidth, then you begin to understand something the initiates staked their lives on. The world is not made of concrete. It is made of responsive, sensitive, frequency-following energy. And energy can be directed. Not by brute force, not by desperate effort, but by consciousness, by attention, by the unwavering, disciplined, precise application of mental authority to the plastic substance of the quantum field. The Vedantic tradition says the universe is the dream of Brahma, that the infinite divine consciousness sleeps, and in sleeping dreams worlds into existence. Galaxies, civilizations, births and deaths, loves and wars, all of it unfolding within the dreaming mind of God. And the most radical, most dangerous, most prosecuted esoteric revelation within that tradition, the one for which Giordano Bruno was silenced with an iron muzzle and then burned, is this: you are not merely the character in the dream. You are also the dreamer. The great collective hallucination of consensus reality functions because billions of minds have agreed, at a level beneath conscious awareness, to dream the same dream simultaneously. We call these collective agreements laws. We call them facts. We call them just the way things are. The sky is blue. Fire burns. Bodies age. Money is scarce. These are not natural laws in the way gravity is a natural law. They are collective spells. They are mass hypnotic agreements that hold their shape only because enough minds hold them simultaneously with enough conviction. Change the minds, and the spell shifts. This is not theory. Every social revolution in human history is proof of this mechanism. Impossible became possible the moment enough minds stopped agreeing that it was impossible. Forbidden metaphysics is the art of withdrawing your consent from the dream, selectively, deliberately, surgically, and rewriting your personal sector of the shared hologram. It is the technology of lucidity applied to waking life. And if that sounds too grand, too abstract, too far from your Monday morning alarm and your unpaid bills and your complicated relationships, then stay with this. Because in the chapters that follow, we are going to make this operational. We are going to take these ancient principles and translate them into practices that work in the actual texture of your actual life. Not in a monastery, not after years of preparation. Now. There is one final piece of architecture in the veil that we need to examine before moving forward, because understanding it changes everything about how you navigate the world. The cruelest trick of Maya, the cornerstone load-bearing wall of the entire hallucination, is the illusion of separation. Your senses tell you that you end where your skin ends, that the air between you and the next person is a gap, a void, a distance between two separate and fundamentally isolated beings. This conviction, so obvious, so self-evident, so never questioned, is the root of virtually all human suffering. It is the origin of scarcity thinking. If we are separate and resources are limited, then your gain is my loss, and I must compete with you or be destroyed. It is the origin of loneliness. If I am the sealed unit behind the boundary of my skin, then connection is always incomplete, always provisional, always at risk of being severed. It is the origin of fear. If I am alone in a universe full of forces that do not know me and do not care about me, then my survival is always under threat. The Hermetic texts say, the all is mind, the universe is mental, and in a mind there is no true separation. When you dream at night, you are the protagonist of the dream, but you are also the villain. You are the landscape. You are the weather. You are the supporting characters, the obstacles, the strangers on the street in the dream. Everything emerges from the same source, your dreaming mind. In waking reality, the same principle applies at a scale too vast for the ego to comfortably accept. The apparent other is not other. They are a version of you, experiencing a different configuration of the one consciousness. The beggar on the corner is consciousness experiencing poverty. The tyrant is consciousness experiencing power without love. The stranger is consciousness wearing a different costume. The war is happening within the one mind, which contains all apparent opposites. When you finally allow this to land, not as a comforting spiritual idea, but as a functional description of how existence actually works, the implications for how you live become immediate and undeniable. You stop managing your relationships as negotiations between competing interests. You stop fighting the world as an enemy. You start recognizing that what you encounter out there is always, without exception, a message from in here. And you begin to understand why the ancient masters prescribed the same medicine across every tradition, every culture, every century. Look inward. Not as a retreat from reality, as the most direct possible route to changing it. But who maintains the illusion? This is where we need to address a question that the Gnostics raised at the cost of their lives, and that modern people instinctively sense but cannot name. If reality is a malleable dream, why is it so relentlessly difficult to change? Why, when you decide to think differently, to live differently, to break a pattern, does it feel like the entire weight of the world conspires to push you back into the old shape? The ancient Gnostic texts speak of the Archons, rulers, guardians of the threshold, the managers of the veil. Modern occultism calls them egregores. They're not medieval demons with horns and tails. They are something far more subtle and, in certain ways, more disturbing. Autonomous thought forms. When millions of people simultaneously believe in fear, they collectively generate a field of fear energy that takes on a kind of functional life of its own. It becomes a self-sustaining system that requires ongoing fear energy to maintain itself, and therefore generates conditions that produce more fear, which feeds more energy back into the system. It is a closed loop, a farm. The veil of Maya is not merely a perceptual glitch. It is a harvesting mechanism. Your unconscious emotional reactions, your panic at the news, your rage in traffic, your anxiety about the future, these are not just personal inconveniences. They are the food source of a system that requires your energy to continue operating. Every time you react to the shadows on the wall, every time you give your full emotional charge to the theater, you are making a deposit into an account you did not open and are not benefiting from. Forbidden Metaphysics teaches a single, precise counter strategy. Not resistance, not warfare, not protest. Starvation. You withdraw your attention. You withdraw your emotional charge. You refuse to react. Because where there is no attention, there is no energy. And where there is no energy sustaining the illusion has no fuel to maintain its shape. The Gnostics called this divine indifference, not coldness, not apathy, a surgical, intentional refusal to be provoked, a sovereignty of attention that the system was never designed to accommodate, because the system requires your participation to function. You are not powerless. You are the power source. And withdrawing your consent is the most revolutionary act available to you. There is an esoteric legend present across multiple traditions under different names that describes something that occurred before written history. A fall, not of Adam and Eve, not a fairy tale about forbidden fruit, but a fall of perception. The legend says there was a time when human consciousness operated at a frequency high enough to perceive energy directly, to see the living field beneath the surface of form, to communicate without the clumsy intermediary of language, to manifest without the friction of doubt, because doubt had not yet been fully installed. The veil of Maya was originally a choice, a voluntary descent into density. Consciousness wanted to experience limitation, to know what it felt like to forget, to struggle, to discover, to be surprised. It wanted to feel the visceral weight of physical experience. Pain, pleasure, love, loss. The specific gravity of a world that pushes back. So it dove. It put on the diving suit of matter. It agreed to play the game of forgetting. The problem, the legend continues, is that the game was more immersive than anticipated. The sensations of physical existence were so compelling, so addictive in their intensity, that the player forgot they were playing. The diving suit became the identity. The forgetting became total. And instead of a temporary adventure that consciousness could step out of at will, it became the indefinite loop of samsara. Consciousness recycling through lives and deaths and lives again, never quite remembering where it came from or what it actually is. Awakening, in every tradition that has transmitted this understanding, is not the acquisition of something new. It is the recovery of something ancient. It is the act of shaking off the amnesia, of looking around in the middle of the dream and saying, "Wait, this is not all there is. I am not this character. I am the one playing the character, and I can play it differently." Modern scientific materialism, the official religion of the current era, was, until very recently, the most sophisticated and well-funded defender of the veil. It told you with great authority and peer-reviewed confidence, consciousness is produced by the brain, the way steam is produced by a boiling kettle. You are a biological accident in an indifferent cosmos. When the machine breaks down, you turn off. Nothing of you persists. Nothing of you was ever more than a temporary pattern of matter that briefly believed it was experiencing something. This worldview, delivered through education, through media, through the language of progress and reason, is the cement that holds the prison walls in place. It makes you feel cosmically small, cosmically alone, cosmically irrelevant. And a being who believes themselves to be cosmically irrelevant will not, cannot, use the authority of their own consciousness to reshape reality. That authority requires a foundation of understanding that the authority is real. And quantum physics, bless its reluctant, peer-reviewed, Nobel-winning heart, has been dismantling that foundation from the inside. The observer effect, the act of measurement, collapses the quantum wave function. The universe, at its most fundamental level, does not have a definite state until it is observed. Quantum entanglement. Two particles, once connected, influence each other instantaneously across any distance, with no physical signal passing between them. A phenomenon Einstein called spooky action at a distance, and spent years trying to explain away. Non-locality. The universe is not made of separate things in separate places. It is a unified field of interconnected information. What the shamans called the web of life. What the mystics called the one mind. What the Hermetic texts called the all. The veil of Maya is tearing, not because the mystics finally got loud enough to be heard, but because the instruments of empirical science have become sensitive enough to detect what the initiates always knew was there. This is your moment. This is the crack through which the light is entering. But the system fights back. It always does. It throws distractions, social media engineered for maximum addictive engagement, news cycles calibrated to maintain a constant background frequency of low-grade anxiety, consumerism offering temporary relief from the existential weight of a life unlived at full depth. All of it has one purpose. Keep your attention on the surface. Keep your eyes fixed on the shadows on the wall. Because the moment you turn around, the moment you look toward the source of the light, everything changes. And things that can change are things the system cannot fully predict or control. The first initiation is simple, not easy, but simple. Begin to practice what the alchemists called the dissolution of matter. Not a physical experiment, a perceptual one. The next time you feel the weight of a problem, a fear, a frustration, a circumstance that feels immovable and permanent, stop. Do not react. Observe, and silently, firmly, without drama, say to yourself, "This is a projection. This is mind made visible. It is not permanent. It is not the final truth. It is energy, and energy responds to the authority of consciousness." At first, the world will seem unimpressed. The problem will still be there. The walls will still seem solid. But something will have shifted in the relationship between you and the problem. A degree of distance. A hairline crack in the conviction of its permanence. And that crack is everything. The masters of every tradition tell us the same thing. The light does not need to smash through the wall. It only needs a crack. Because light, once it enters, expands. Hold that crack open. You have already begun. There is a moment that happens every single morning, and almost every single person on the planet sleeps through it. Not literally, but perhaps more tragically, perceptually. It is the moment between sleep and waking. Before your name floods back, before your to-do list reassembles itself, before your worries, your identity, your debts, your diagnoses, your history return to occupy the space of your awareness. In that thin gap, that fraction of a second of pure, unbranded consciousness, you simply are. Not John, not Maria, not the one who failed, or the one who is sick, or the one who is behind on rent. Just presence, just awareness, just the hum of being with nothing attached to it yet. That moment is not nothing. That moment is everything. That moment is the crack through which the most dangerous truth in human history keeps trying to reach you. The truth that the Gnostics encoded in secret manuscripts and transmitted in whispers under threat of death. The truth that the Hermetic lodges of Renaissance Europe preserved at enormous personal risk. The truth that the Church worked for centuries to bury under layers of doctrine, guilt, and institutional authority. Here it is. There is no God above you sitting in judgment. There is a God inside you, dreaming your life, and it is asleep. You are not a creature of clay to whom divine breath was graciously granted as a gift from a higher authority. That is the story for the uninitiated. That is the operating manual distributed to the herd to ensure the herd remains manageable. The actual teaching, the major arcana, the hidden curriculum of every genuine mystery school from Alexandria to the Aztec pyramids, is this: you are the mind. You are the consciousness that is generating the experience of your life. You do not live inside the universe lives inside you. Now, before that lands as either a comfortable spiritual affirmation or an overwhelming philosophical abstraction, let us go to the source. Let us go back to the oldest surviving document of Hermetic wisdom, the Kybalion, a text that condenses the knowledge that survived the burning of Alexandria into 7 foundational principles. The first, the most fundamental, the one on which all the others are built. The all is mind. The universe is mental. Read that carefully. Not the universe has a mind. Not the universe thinks. The universe is mind. Matter, energy, time, space, everything you have been taught to regard as the hard, objective, external world are condensed thoughts. Just as ice is frozen water and steam is heated water, matter is simply frozen mind. Different states of the same substance. And what is that substance? Consciousness. You are not walking on solid ground. You are walking on thought. More specifically and more uncomfortably, you are walking on your own thought. Orthodox religion, across virtually every mainstream tradition, taught you to look outward and upward for divinity, to address God as a separate, superior being located somewhere above and beyond you, to approach that being in a posture of supplication, of smallness, of unworthiness. Please, if it is your will, I am not worthy, but... The great metaphysical crime of institutional religion was not that it spoke about God, it was that it externalized God. By convincing you that divinity is located outside of you, it turned you into a spiritual beggar, perpetually seeking, perpetually petitioning, perpetually dependent on an intermediary, the priest, the ritual, the institution, to make the connection that you were told you could not make yourself. Forbidden Metaphysics returns what was stolen. It says, divinity is not a location. It is not a being separate from you. It is the original substance of which you are made. Your imagination, the thing you were taught to regard as childish fantasy, as escapism, as the opposite of serious, practical thinking, is not a triviality. Your imagination is the workshop of God. It is the mechanism by which the Creator, which is you, shapes the mental substance of the universe into the configurations that then appear as physical reality. Consider what that means in terms of your daily experience. Most people use their imagination in one primary mode: worry. They sit with their eyes open or their eyes closed, and they run detailed, emotionally charged mental films of everything they do not want. What if I lose my job? What if the relationship falls apart? What if the diagnosis is worse than they said? What if I never make it? These are not idle thoughts. In the architecture of Forbidden Metaphysics, these are prayers. They are creative acts. They are the sleeping God speaking, and what the sleeping God speaks becomes the trajectory of the material world. You have been a black magician your entire life, hexing your own future with the full creative power of divine imagination, pointed in the wrong direction, running on automatic while you slept. Now you are being asked to wake up. Now consider the inverse. The same mechanism that generates your fears generates your liberation. The same faculty that builds the prison is the faculty that dismantles it. You are not missing a tool. You are not lacking a resource. The tool is already running. The only question is whether it runs on automatic, projecting the contents of your fear-saturated subconscious onto the screen of reality, or whether you wake up inside the game and begin directing it with intention. The sleeping God you are is that part of you which exists beneath the noise, behind the mental chatter, behind the anxiety and the planning and the self-criticism and the social performance. There is a layer of you, silent, vast, and completely undamaged by everything that has ever happened to your body or your story, that has been observing your entire life without reacting to any of it. Here is a question that will either pass through you quickly or stop you completely, depending on where you are in your readiness. If you can listen to the voice in your head, if you can observe your own thoughts, notice them arising, watch them pass, then who is the one doing the watching? The voice is not you. The voice is the ego, the narrator, the character, the survival mechanism, the social construction assembled from years of conditioning. But the one who hears the voice, the one who notices the noticing, the awareness that is aware of being aware, that is the sleeping God. That is the consciousness that was never born and will never die. That is what you actually are. And it is right there. It has always been right there. It is not hidden from you. It is what is reading these words right now through your eyes. While the sleeping God dreams, someone else sits on the throne, the ego. In Gnostic texts, sometimes called the false spirit. In psychology, the persona assembled from childhood conditioning. In practical terms, the voice that never shuts up. The ego's job, its only job, its entire operational mandate, is to keep the biological body alive. And to do that job, it relies primarily on one tool: fear. Specifically, the fear of separation, the fear of not having enough, the fear of being excluded from the group, the fear of death. The ego lives in time. It is haunted by the past and terrified of the future. It is never fully present because the present moment is the one place where most threats do not actually exist. Most danger, when examined closely, is either a memory or a projection. The actual present moment, the immediate now, is almost always manageable. But the ego cannot afford to let you notice that. So it keeps you running between past guilt and future dread, burning your creative energy on scenarios that are not happening and keeping you too exhausted to notice that you have been asleep. Human suffering, the the chronic, grinding, seemingly inescapable suffering that most people consider simply the condition of being alive is almost entirely generated by this usurpation. You are attempting to solve cosmic-scale problems, the creation of your reality, the navigation of existence, the fulfillment of your actual purpose, using an animal-level survival tool that was designed for avoiding predators on the savannah. It is like trying to compose a symphony with a hammer. The instrument is not wrong. It is simply not designed for the task being demanded of it. Forbidden Metaphysics does not tell you to destroy the ego. That is both impossible and counterproductive. The ego serves real functions. It keeps you from walking into traffic. It reminds you to eat. It manages the logistics of physical existence with remarkable efficiency. The work is not destruction. The work is a restoration of the correct hierarchy. The sleeping God awakens and reclaims the throne. The ego returns to its rightful role, a skilled and useful servant, an advisor who handles practical matters, but never again the king. How does the sleeping God communicate? How does it speak when it has been silenced for so long? This is where one of the most closely guarded secrets of the Hermetic Lodges becomes essential. The God consciousness within you does not speak in language. Language is a human construction, a system of labels applied to experience after the fact. The sleeping God speaks in image and sensation, in feeling, in the specific quality of aliveness that arises when you are moving in alignment with your deepest nature. The biblical statement that humanity was made in the image and likeness of God has been interpreted for centuries as a claim about physical resemblance, as though God has 2 eyes and 10 fingers. William Blake, the visionary poet who encoded Hermetic truth in his art when it was too dangerous to speak directly, gave the real interpretation. Imagination is not a state. It is human existence itself. To be made in the image of God means to be made of the same creative substance as God. It means that what God does at the scale of universes, you do at the scale of a life. You imagine, you create, and what you imagine with sufficient consistency and emotional charge, you eventually inhabit. Every structure you see was once an image in a mind. Every institution, every technology, every relationship pattern was first a thought. The physical world is the graveyard of imagination's past. It is what previous creative acts look like after they have cooled into matter. Your current circumstances are the physical residue of your previous imaginings, which means your current imaginings are the blueprint of your future circumstances. This is not poetry. This is the operating principle of reality. And the ancient Hebrew mystical tradition encoded it in a formula so precise and so powerful that they considered it too dangerous to speak aloud. The unpronounceable name of God, YHWH, whose closest translation given to Moses in the burning bush was not a name at all, but a declaration. I am that I am. Or, in its most potent reduction, I am. I am is not a theological statement. It is the source code of reality. It is the creative command that sets the universe in motion at the personal level. Every time you speak the words "I am" and attach something to them, you are issuing a decree to the consciousness that generates your experience. I am tired. I am unlucky. I am sick. I am not enough. The universe, the responsive, literal, non-sarcastic mental substance of reality, receives these not as complaints or casual observations, but as creative instructions, as orders. So be it, it says, and it builds accordingly. The master of Forbidden Metaphysics learns to treat every I am statement as a loaded weapon. They become ferociously conscious of what they attach to their identity, because they know that the identity is the mold and reality is the substance that fills it. They refuse, regardless of what their physical circumstances currently show, to attach limitation to the name of God. Even when the bank account reads 0, the inner decree reads abundance. Even when the body is in pain, the inner decree reads health. Not because they are in denial, because they understand that physical reality is the echo of a previous thought, and they are already speaking the next thought into being. There is a reason the average person resists this teaching with surprising ferocity, and it is not stupidity. It is not a lack of spiritual capacity. It is something more fundamental, the terror of responsibility. If the sleeping God is what I actually am, then my life is my creation. Every pattern of lack, every failed relationship, every persistent health problem, every missed opportunity, I made that. Not the government, not my parents, not the economy, not God. Me. The ego cannot survive this realization intact. It requires an external cause for every internal state. It requires a villain, a circumstance, a force beyond the self that explains why things are the way they are. Take that away, and the ego is left naked with the full weight of creative authorship. This is why spiritual seekers collect beautiful ideas and never change. The idea of being a sleeping God is thrilling. The responsibility of being a sleeping God is crushing. But here is the turn, and it is the most important turn in this entire codex. The crushing weight of responsibility, if you walk into it instead of running from it, transforms into something else entirely on the other side. It transforms into sovereignty. Absolute, unassailable, untakeawayable sovereignty. Because if you created it, you can uncreate it. If the pattern is yours, it can be changed. If the program is running in your mind, you have access to the source code. The victim has no power. The creator has all of it. The path through the terror of responsibility is not around it. It is directly through the center of it. And what waits on the other side is a quality of freedom that no external circumstance can ever grant or remove. Because it is not based on conditions, it is based on what you are. And what you are is the mind that is dreaming the world. Begin tonight with this. In the 5 minutes before you fall asleep, when the threshold between waking and dreaming is thin and the critical filters are lowering, Speak to the sleeping God, not in petition, in decree. Not, please let this be so, in recognition. This is what I am. This is what I create. This is the world I inhabit. Feel it, even slightly, even imperfectly. Feel the faintest edge of what it would feel like to be the version of you that already lives in that reality. That feeling, however brief, however fragile, is a signal. It is the God within you hearing itself called by name, and it will answer. It always answers. The only question has ever been whether you were awake enough to hear the response. Most people confuse faith with hope, and that confusion is costing them everything. Hope is the spiritual waiting room. It is the place where people sit with their hands folded, looking at the door, telling themselves that maybe, eventually, if conditions align and luck cooperates and the universe is in a generous mood, something good might happen. Hope is the prayer of the person who does not believe their prayer will be answered. It is dressed in the language of optimism, but built on the foundation of doubt. And the universe, which is not a vending machine responding to politeness, but a mirror responding to frequency, returns exactly what hope broadcasts: more absence, more waiting, more not yet. What the Codex of the Silenced calls relentless certainty is something categorically different. It is not an emotion. It is not a mood you cultivate when circumstances feel favorable. It is a mechanical force, a law, as precise and as indifferent to your personal feelings about it as gravity. Gravity does not wait for you to believe in it before it pulls you to the ground. It does not reward the faithful and suspend itself for the skeptical. It simply acts, universally, constantly, without exception. Relentless certainty operates by the same logic. When you achieve it, and achieving it is a discipline, not a gift, the universe has no choice but to respond. It is not magic in the theatrical sense. It is hydraulics. The universe is not empty space. The ancient alchemists called it the ether. Modern physicists call it the quantum field, the zero-point field, the vacuum energy that underlies all matter. The name has changed. The nature has not. This field is plastic. It is responsive. It takes the shape of the dominant signal it receives, and by default, in the absence of deliberate direction, it takes the shape of your deepest subconscious convictions. Not your stated desires, not your affirmations, not what you say you believe when someone asks, your deepest actual beliefs. The ones running silently in the background, installed before you had the cognitive development to question them, operating beneath the level of conscious awareness with the quiet relentlessness of a program that was never given an off switch. If those beliefs say life is a struggle, the field hardens and offers you resistance. If they say money is something other people have, the field arranges circumstances that confirm the absence. If they say you are fundamentally unlovable, the field casts every relationship in a light that eventually proves the point. The problem is not willpower. The problem is not effort. The average person trying to change their life is pouring water into a bucket with a large hole in the bottom, and the hole is their subconscious conviction that change is impossible. Relentless certainty is the art of plugging the hole. It is the capacity to hold a mental mold, a specific, vivid, emotionally inhabited image of a desired reality, with such consistency and such stillness that the quantum field has no choice but to fill it. The key word is hold, not force, not strain, not clench your teeth and believe very hard. Hold. The way a die holds its shape when you pour molten metal into it. The metal does not struggle to become the shape of the die. The die simply maintains its form with perfect consistency, and the metal, being fluid, has no option but to conform. You are the die. Reality is the metal. The question is always, how stable is your mold? Here is where the Codex delivers a teaching that will offend the spiritual mainstream and liberate the serious practitioner. Hope is not a virtue. Hope is a declaration of lack dressed in the costume of virtue. You only hope for what you do not have. If you are holding your keys in your hand right now, you are not hoping to have your keys. You know you have your keys. The certainty is total and effortless because the physical evidence is immediate. The initiate of Forbidden Metaphysics applies that same quality of knowing, not to what is physically present, but to what is mentally decreed. Before the physical evidence arrives, before the body heals, before the money appears, before the relationship transforms. The master does not hope, the master assumes. They walk through a world that has not yet caught up with their internal reality, with the calm of someone who has already read the last page of the book and knows how it ends. This distinction is the razor's edge that separates genuine practitioners from spiritual hobbyists. The dreamer wants. The initiate has, in the only dimension that ultimately matters, the dimension of consciousness, and waits with the tranquility of inevitability for the physical dimension to confirm what is already established. There is a Greek myth that the Hermetic tradition encoded with precise technical meaning: Medusa. Anyone who looked directly into Medusa's eyes was turned to stone. Not killed, turned to stone, made permanent, made solid, made real. Your consciousness is Medusa. Your sustained, unwavering observation of a possibility is what collapses it from wave into particle, from potential into manifest reality. This is the observer effect expressed as mythology. When you look at your desired reality, your health, your abundance, your creative expression, and you hold that gaze without flinching, without looking away at the contradicting evidence, without letting the storm on the water pull your eyes from the destination, you are petrifying it. You are pulling it from the dimension of possibility into the dimension of fact. The storm will come. It always comes. The ancient story of Peter walking on water is the most precise allegory for this process that exists in the Western tradition. As long as Peter kept his attention fixed on the Master, on the truth, on the higher principle, on the reality he was choosing, over the reality his senses were insisting upon, he walked on the impossible. Gravity, density, all the conventional laws of the physical world were suspended, not by divine intervention, but by the quality of his attention. The moment he looked at the storm, the moment he validated what his senses were telling him, the moment he let the screaming of physical evidence override the quiet authority of his chosen reality, certainty broke. Doubt entered the mold like a crack in the die, and the metal of reality, fluid and responsive, immediately changed shape to match the new signal. He sank, not because the miracle was revoked, because he stopped generating it. This happens to every person who enters a genuine process of transformation. The initial surge of inspiration creates real movement. The field begins to respond. And then, precisely because the field is responding, precisely because the old reality is beginning to dissolve and the transition creates turbulence, the physical world seems to get worse before it gets better. The old structures rattle. The old patterns make one final dramatic attempt to reassert themselves. And the uninitiated, seeing this escalation of difficulty, conclude that the process has failed and abandon it. They do not know that they were 3 days from the breakthrough. They do not know that the death rattle of the old reality is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of success. Hold the mold. The universe is testing the quality of your certainty. It is asking, do you actually believe this? Or do you believe it only when it is convenient? Because convenient belief is not belief. It is preference. And preference does not move mountains. Only certainty does. Now we must go deeper. Because all of this, the relentless certainty, the mental mold, the decree, runs into a wall. A wall that is invisible, powerful, and almost entirely misunderstood. The wall is you. Specifically, the part of you that has been running the show since before you were old enough to know there was a show. In the esoteric tradition, this entity has been called many things. The guardian of the threshold, the shadow keeper, the golem, the double. In the language of this codex, we call it the Hidden Scribe. Here is its nature. The Hidden Scribe controls approximately 95% of your behavior, your decisions, your emotional responses, your physical health, and your relationship patterns. That is not a metaphor or an exaggeration. Neuroscience confirms it. The overwhelming majority of what you experience as conscious choice has already been decided at the subconscious level milliseconds before you become aware of having made a choice. You do not decide, then act. You act, and then the conscious mind constructs a narrative that makes it feel like a decision. The captain on the bridge thinks they are steering the ship. The engine room made the turn before the captain finished the thought. And the engine room takes its orders from programming that was installed without your knowledge or consent in the earliest years of your life. From the moment of conception until approximately age 7, the human brain operates primarily in theta brainwave frequency. This is the same frequency that hypnotherapists induce in their patients to bypass the critical faculty and access the subconscious directly. A child in theta has no filter, no defense mechanism, no ability to evaluate an incoming belief, compare it against existing knowledge, and choose whether to accept or reject it. Everything lands. Everything is installed. If your father's relationship with money was characterized by anxiety and scarcity, the The scribe noted, "Universal law, money produces suffering." If your mother's relationship with the world was characterized by fear, the scribe noted, "The world is a dangerous place. Stay alert, stay small, stay defended." If a teacher humiliated you publicly at a critical developmental moment, the scribe noted, "Visibility is dangerous. Being seen leads to pain. Hide." These are not memories. They are not recollections you can choose to override through willpower. They are operating commands. They are the source code on which your experience of reality is currently running. And until that code is located, examined, and deliberately rewritten, all the affirmations in the world are like a user typing instructions into the keyboard of a computer whose operating system has already been programmed to ignore them. The scribe is loyal. That is the most important thing to understand about it. It is not your enemy. It is not malicious. It is a perfectly faithful servant executing orders it received in the earliest and most vulnerable years of your existence. It is loyal to your survival. It is loyal to the clan, to the patterns of your parents and their parents before them, because those patterns, whatever their psychological cost, produced bodies that survived long enough to reproduce. The scribe does not care whether you are happy. It cares whether you are alive. And the patterns that kept your ancestors alive, the fear, the smallness, the self-limitation, the loyalty to the known, are the patterns the scribe is faithfully, tirelessly reproducing in your present life. Carl Jung called the hidden contents of the subconscious the shadow, not because they are evil, but because they live in the part of the psyche where the light does not reach. The shadow contains everything that was pushed underground because the child was told it was unacceptable. Your anger, your ambition, your sexuality, your wildness, your defiance, your need for more than you were given permission to want. Society, family, religion, all collaborated in the construction of an acceptable surface self, agreeable, manageable, predictable, and everything that did not fit the mold was pushed into the basement. But what you bury alive does not die. It festers, it grows, it leaks through the walls in disguised and distorted forms. Repressed anger becomes chronic anxiety or autoimmune disease, the body quite literally attacking itself. Repressed desire becomes compulsion or shame. Repressed ambition becomes resentment of those who have what you secretly want. And the hidden scribe spends an enormous portion of your available vital energy on the single task of keeping the basement door closed. This is why you are tired. Not because your life is too demanding, because 80% of your energy is allocated to the maintenance of a self that is not actually you. The mask consumes more energy than the face beneath it. The work of rewriting the scribe is the great work. Without it, everything else in this codex is intellectual entertainment. With it, everything changes. Not gradually, not eventually, but fundamentally, because you are changing the projector, not negotiating with the image on the screen. The scribe does not speak English. It does not speak Spanish or Mandarin or French. It does not understand the word no. Show it an image of what you do not want, and it will begin building it, because it processes imagery, not linguistic negation. It understands three things:
vivid images, emotional charge, and repetition. To rewrite the scribe, you must communicate in its language. Not, "I want to be financially free." That is abstract, verbal, and lands nowhere. The image of yourself opening a bank notification showing a balance that makes you exhale with relief, that lands. The physical sensation of that relief, recalled and inhabited with enough emotional detail that your nervous system cannot distinguish it from a real memory, that lands. Repeat it nightly in the hypnagogic state just before sleep, when the critical faculty relaxes its guard and the basement door swings open. That rewrites. The ancient masters knew this.
Prayer was never designed as a request directed at an external God. In its original technical application, prayer is self-hypnosis for the scribe. The rituals, the incense, the repetitive chant, the golden icons, these are not superstition. They are technology. Sensory immersion technology designed to bypass the conscious mind and imprint new operating instructions directly onto the subconscious. You do not need a cathedral. Your bedroom in the 5 minutes before you lose consciousness is the most powerful ritual space available to you. Use it deliberately. Feed the scribe the images of your desired reality in those minutes. Wrap those images in the emotion of completion, not longing, not hoping, but the specific physical sensation of already having arrived. And then sleep, while the scribe works through 8 hours of REM cycles to reorganize your neurology, your behavior, your perception of opportunity, and the signals you broadcast into the quantum field, all in service of the new instructions you gave it in the dark. The initiate does not wait for circumstances to change before changing their inner state. The initiate changes the inner state first, and then watches with a patience that is not passive, but charged with the quiet electricity of certainty, as the outer world slowly, inevitably, catches up. Everything you have been taught about becoming a higher version of yourself is built on a lie. And it is a lie designed with surgical precision to keep you exactly where you are. The lie goes like this: to evolve, to grow, to manifest, to rise, you must be calm. You must be peaceful. You must maintain a high vibration, which in the language of the modern spiritual marketplace means be positive, suppress the darkness, perform serenity, and under no circumstances allow yourself to feel the full, raw, unfiltered intensity of your most difficult emotions. The Codex of the Silenced calls this what it is: spiritual castration. A human being who has been successfully separated from the full spectrum of their emotional power is not a high being. They are a domesticated one. They are manageable. They are predictable. They are safe. Safe for the system. Safe for the institutions. Safe for the people around them who are equally invested in keeping the emotional temperature of the room at a level that requires no one to confront anything real. Reality, however, does not respond to managed emotion. It does not bend for the carefully curated inner life. It responds to intensity, to full-spectrum aliveness, to the kind of energy that can only be generated by a being who has stopped hiding from themselves. Magic, genuine, reality-altering, timeline-bending magic, is not the art of the passive. It is the art of the alchemical warrior. And to move the heavy machinery of the universe, to collapse quantum waves into solid form, to materialize from the invisible substance of the field something that has never physically existed before, you need fuel. Not the thin, lukewarm fuel of managed positivity. Nuclear fuel. And that fuel is found precisely where you have been most forcefully told not to look. In your anger, your grief, your desire, your fear, your pain. Welcome to the alchemist's laboratory. Here, nothing is rejected. Here, nothing is labeled too dark or too dangerous or too low vibration to be useful. Here, the heaviest lead of human emotional experience is the raw material. And the process, the great work, is the transmutation of that lead into the pure gold of directed creative power. The first thing to understand is the difference between repression and transmutation, because most people, when they hear, "Do not let your emotions control you," understand it as repression. They push the feeling down. They override it with positive thinking. They perform wellness while the pressure builds in the basement. This is not alchemy. This is a pressure cooker with a sealed valve. It will eventually explode, and the explosion will be indiscriminate and destructive. Transmutation is the opposite of repression. Transmutation begins with full permission, radical, unconditional, total permission to feel the emotion at its maximum intensity. You do not fight it. You do not manage it. You do not perform equanimity over it. You feel it completely. You locate it in the body, the knot in the chest, the heat in the stomach, the tightening in the throat. And you let it be exactly as large and as uncomfortable as it actually is. And then, instead of letting it explode outward in the form of unconscious reaction, or implode inward in the form of suppression, you do something the system never taught you. You contain it. You hold it inside the vessel of your awareness. You feel the pressure rising. You feel the heat. And in that state of maximum energetic charge, you direct. You point the accumulated force of the emotion, all of it without diluting it, at your desired reality. You use the fuel to launch the vision. Anger, specifically sacred anger, is perhaps the most misunderstood and most squandered resource available to a human being. We are taught that anger is destructive, that it is a sign of low consciousness, that the evolved person does not get angry. But every genuine revolution, personal or collective, begins with a moment of anger. The moment of enough. The moment when a person looks at their circumstances, looks at the gap between what is and what is possible, and feels in their bones a refusal so total and so energetically charged that it breaks the inertia of years in a single instant. That anger is not low. That anger is sacred. It is the force that defines territory. It is the energy of the immune system recognizing an intrusion and mobilizing to expel it. Without access to this force, you have no real boundaries. You have preferences and discomforts, but no actual lines that cannot be crossed. Because crossing your lines does not generate the energetic response that makes the boundary real. Use your anger. When it rises,
Do not launch it at the person or situation that triggered it. They are not the point. They are merely the mechanism that delivered the fuel. Take the fuel. Feel the heat in your body. See your goal, and decree into that heat with the full force of your refusal. This ends now. This is where my new reality begins. I am done with this version of my life. That decree, charged with genuine sacred anger, carries a vibrational weight that a pleasant affirmation spoken in a state of calm could never match. The field responds to charge. Give it charge. The second great fuel is the one the occult lodges have protected most carefully, the one that Napoleon Hill addressed in a chapter that publishers begged him to remove, the one that every genuine mystery school, from the tantric traditions of India to the Rosicrucian lodges of Europe, has encoded in its most advanced teachings. Sexual energy. Understand what sexual energy actually is before you dismiss or reduce it. It is not merely the drive to reproduce. It is the primal creative force of the universe expressing itself through a biological system. It is the energy that, at its most fundamental level, generates new life, new physical reality from nothing. It is the most concentrated, most potent, most generative energy a human body produces. And the average person spends it like a lottery winner who has never learned the concept of investment. The alchemical teaching on sexual energy is not a call to forced celibacy or sexual denial. It is a call to intention. It is the understanding that at the peak of sexual arousal, when the body is operating at maximum energetic charge, the consciousness has access to a creative force that dwarfs anything available in ordinary waking states. And what you fill that state with, what image, what vision, what decree occupies your mind in that moment of maximum power, is imprinted on the quantum field with an intensity that no other practice can replicate. This is why the mystery schools considered this teaching the innermost arcanum. Not because sexuality is shameful, but because this particular application of sexual energy is the closest thing to literal divine creation that a human being can access. Use it with intention. Use it consciously, and watch what begins to materialize in the weeks that follow. The third fuel is the one no one wants to accept: pain. Genuine, deep, soul-level pain. Grief, despair. The specific quality of suffering that arrives when everything you were holding on to has been taken, when the ego has been stripped of its defenses, when there is nothing left to perform and nothing left to protect. This state, which the mystical traditions across every culture call the dark night of the soul, is not a punishment. It is not evidence of failure or spiritual regression. It is the alchemical furnace operating at maximum temperature. It is the fire that burns away everything that was never real to begin with. The pretenses, the comfortable stories, the carefully maintained illusions about who you are and what you need, leaving behind only what is actually true, actually solid, actually you.
Many of the most transformative manifestations in human history have emerged from the precise moment of total collapse. The bankruptcy that preceded the empire, the diagnosis that preceded the healing, the loss that preceded the love that actually lasted. Pain, when it is not fled from but entered deliberately and consciously, when its energy is gathered and directed rather than wasted in unconscious suffering, becomes the heaviest and most powerful of all the alchemical fuels. If you are in pain right now, do not look away from this. Say to the experience, I receive you. I do not consent to waste you. Every gram of this weight becomes the foundation of what I am building. That is not spiritual bypassing. That is the opposite of spiritual bypassing. That is the full contact, eyes open, nothing excluded engagement with reality that the alchemists called the great work. In the beginning was not the light. In the beginning was the Word. Every sacred tradition, from the opening of the Gospel of John to the Vedic concept of Nada Brahma, the universe as sound, to the Aboriginal Australian understanding of the song lines that literally sang the physical world into existence, arrives at the same understanding. Reality is vibrational, and the most direct human access point to the vibrational architecture of reality is the voice. Your throat is a dimensional portal. It is the only organ in the body capable of taking an internal state, a thought, an intention, an emotional charge, and launching it as a physical wave into the external world. When you speak, you are not merely communicating information. You are generating frequency. You are physically altering the vibrational content of the space around you. The ancient science of cymatics demonstrates this with startling visual clarity. A metal plate covered in sand, subjected to different sound frequencies, instantly self-organizes into geometric patterns of extraordinary precision and beauty. Different frequencies produce different patterns. Silence produces chaos. Your life is that metal plate. Your words are the frequency. Your circumstances, your relationships, your health, your financial reality, these are the patterns in the sand. And if your life currently looks like chaos, the first place to look is not your actions, not your strategy, not your connections or your luck. The first place to look is the song you are singing. Not the song you perform publicly, the words you choose carefully in social situations, the song you sing unconsciously, automatically, habitually, the internal monologue that runs from the moment you wake until the moment you lose consciousness, and the words that come out of your mouth without deliberate thought, in unguarded moments, in casual conversation, in the commentary you offer about yourself and your life when no one important is listening. I am exhausted. I never have enough. Things never work out for me. I am terrible with money. Nobody really understands me. These are not expressions of frustration. They are decrees. They are creative instructions delivered in the language that the universe receives most directly, the vibration of your actual voice, charged with the emotion of genuine conviction. The universe does not understand sarcasm. It does not process, "I was just venting." It receives frequency and responds to frequency with the mechanical indifference of a mirror. It does not judge what it reflects. It simply reflects. The Pythagorean initiates, among the most rigorous and disciplined mystery schools of the ancient world, required new students to maintain a complete vow of silence for up to 5 years before they were permitted to receive the higher teachings. This was not punishment. It was energetic hygiene combined with power accumulation. Every word you speak is an expenditure of psychic energy. Every unnecessary word is a leak in the vessel. The initiate who has learned to speak only with intention, only when the word serves a genuine creative purpose, accumulates a density of inner power that the chronically verbal person never achieves. Their words, when they finally speak, carry weight, not because they have learned rhetoric, but because each word carries the compressed energy of all the words they chose not to say. Guard your speech, not in the sense of performing positivity or pretending circumstances are other than they are. Guard it in the sense of radical intentionality. Ask before you speak, does this word build, heal, or reveal truth? If not, let it remain unspoken. The silence that remains when you stop narrating your limitations is not empty. It is the charged silence before the lightning. And complaining, of all the misuses of the vocal instrument, complaining is the most destructive, the most common, and the most invisible, because it has been so thoroughly normalized. Complaining is a prayer in reverse. It is a decree of what you do not want, charged with the emotional fuel of frustration and delivered with the conviction of genuine belief. When you complain about your financial situation, you are not expressing a feeling. You are issuing a command to the field. More of this. When you complain about your health, you are not seeking sympathy. You are reinforcing the vibrational architecture of illness. When you complain about the people in your life, you are not processing an experience. You are tightening the screws of the pattern. The Codex demands a practice that will reveal more about the current state of your consciousness than almost any other exercise. Attempt to go 24 hours without a single complaint, verbal or mental. You will discover within the first hour that you do not know what to think about if you are not thinking about what is wrong. That discovery is important. It is the map of where your creative energy is currently being spent. The space that opens when the complaining stops is where the new reality begins to grow. Every person you have ever called an enemy, every situation you have ever called unjust, every pattern you have experienced as imposed on you from outside, look again. Look with the eyes of the Codex, which does not offer comfort, but offers something more valuable: accuracy. What you see outside is what you carry inside, made visible. The universe is not commenting on you. It is reflecting you. It is doing nothing other than returning your own signal with perfect fidelity, at a slight delay, the delay of matter, the time it takes for inner cause to produce outer effect. The person who triggers you most deeply is not your enemy. They are your mirror. They are showing you, with a precision that no therapist could match, exactly what is unresolved in your own interior. The quality in them that produces the strongest reaction in you is always, without exception, something you have not yet made peace with in yourself. Your unacknowledged anger appearing as someone else's aggression. Your repressed desire appearing as someone else's indulgence. Your unexpressed power appearing as someone else's dominance. You are not seeing them. You are seeing yourself through the lens of projection in the most unflattering possible light. This is not a comfortable teaching. The ego despises it because the ego's survival depends on the existence of external causes for internal states. But it is the most practically useful map of the psyche that exists, because it means that every irritation, every conflict, every persistent pattern of difficulty in your external world is a precise diagnostic of something that can be addressed, healed, and transformed, not out there, but in here, where you actually have access and authority. The mechanics of the mirror are simple. Your dominant subconscious vibration generates a signal. The field receives that signal and reflects it back as circumstance, as relationship, as the texture of your daily experience. Change the signal, and the reflection changes. Not immediately. Matter has inertia, and the mirror of physical reality takes time to update. But inevitably, completely, and in exact proportion to the depth and consistency of the inner change. Forgiveness, understood through the Codex, is not a moral virtue. It is not something you do for the other person. It is the most ruthlessly selfish act available to you, because resentment is the chain that keeps you bound to the person who hurt you with greater force than any external constraint could achieve. As long as you hold the resentment, you are in relationship with that person's energy, feeding it, being fed upon by it, co-creating with it. Your hatred of them is a love of a particularly toxic kind, constant, consuming, generative of more of what it claims to oppose. Forgiveness cuts the energetic cord. It does not say what happened was acceptable. It says, I am withdrawing my creative energy from the story of what you did to me. I am no longer willing to spend my generative power on the maintenance of this wound. I release you from my script, not for your sake, but for mine, because I have empires to build, and I cannot build them while my hands are occupied holding this burning coal. The mirror of your life will begin to change the moment you genuinely release the past from its role as the architect of your present. Not the memory. You cannot and should not erase memory, but the authority. The resentment's authority to determine what is possible for you now. Revoke that authority. Clean the glass, and prepare to see something entirely different looking back. Stop. Before we go any further into this final chapter, I need you to do something. Not metaphorically, literally. Stop whatever else your mind is doing right now. The background planning, the half-formed worry, the quiet commentary about whether any of this is real or applicable or too much to believe. And just be here for a moment. Because what we are about to cover is not additional information layered on top of what came before. It is the capstone. It is the piece that makes the entire architecture load-bearing. Without it, everything else in this codex is a collection of powerful ideas that will gradually fade back into the noise of daily life, the way every book you have ever read eventually fades, the way every moment of inspiration you have ever felt eventually contracted back into the familiar smallness of the ordinary. With it, everything changes. Permanently. Because what we are about to dismantle is the final and most sophisticated cage, your relationship with time. And with it, the fear that sits at the absolute root of every other fear, the fear that you will run out of it. The system has one master tool, one whip above all others, one mechanism of control so effective, so universally applied, so deeply installed that most people never even identify it as a tool of control. They simply experience it as reality itself. That tool is linear time. The story of the straight line. You were born at point A, you are moving toward point B, and at point C you will die, and after that there is either divine judgment or absolute nothing. And either way, the clock is running and you are losing. This story makes you manageable. A being who believes they are running out of time does not pause to question the direction they are running. They just run. They consume, they comply, they compete, they accumulate, they perform, all within the framework of a race they did not choose to enter and cannot exit. The ancient Greeks, who understood the architecture of consciousness with a sophistication that most modern psychology has not yet recovered, had two entirely distinct words for time. The first was chronos, sequential time, the time of the clock, the time of cause and effect, the time of aging and waiting, and the slow grind of effort and delay. Chronos is the god who devoured his own children. Linear time literally consumes the moments of your life, turning each present instant into past ash before you can fully inhabit it, before you can extract from it the depth of experience it was capable of offering. The second word was kairos, the time of the magician, the time of depth rather than duration, the appointed moment, the instant of perfect alignment when the vertical axis of eternity intersects the horizontal axis of sequence, and something becomes possible that was not possible a moment before. In Kairos, a single second can contain more genuine life than a decade of Chronos. A first kiss, a moment of absolute creative clarity, the instant of genuine forgiveness, the breath just before a decision that changes everything. In Kairos, you do not move forward through time, you move inward through depth. And it is only in Kairos, only in the vertical dimension of the eternal present, that genuine transformation is instantaneous. Because here is the truth that the Codex has been building toward from the very first word. The version of you that you most deeply desire to become is not in the future. It is not something you will achieve after sufficient effort and elapsed time. It exists right now in a parallel frequency of reality, fully formed, fully alive, fully inhabiting the circumstances you have been working toward. All possible versions of your life exist simultaneously. The block universe, a concept that Einstein arrived at through mathematics and that the Hermetic initiates arrived at through direct inner experience thousands of years earlier, tells us that past, present, and future are not sequential events. They are simultaneous dimensions. The loaf of bread is already baked. Every slice already exists. What you experience as moving through time is not the universe unfolding. It is your awareness moving through a structure that is already complete. Your successful self, your healed self, your sovereign, creative, fully expressed self. These are not futures to be earned, they are frequencies to be tuned. The only distance between you and that version of yourself is not time, it is vibration. It is the gap between the frequency you are currently broadcasting, shaped by your subconscious programming, your habitual emotional states, your practiced patterns of thought, and the frequency that version of you inhabits. Close that gap in consciousness, and the physical reality closes the gap automatically. This is why the most advanced practitioners of these principles speak not of manifesting, as though pulling something from a distant future into the present, but of tuning, of selecting, of recognizing what already is and adjusting your receiver until you can pick up the signal clearly. You are not building a future. You are choosing which present to inhabit. The anxiety of the waiting room is perhaps the most universal form of human suffering. I will be happy when. I will feel secure after. I will finally be myself once. The when is the trap. The after is the prison. The once is the indefinite sentence. By locating your satisfaction, your wholeness, your permission to fully live in a future conditional, you are declaring to the universe, through the most powerful decree available, the decree of your actual emotional state, that in the present moment you are incomplete. And the hidden scribe, that faithful and literal servant of your dominant inner state, notes the instruction and builds accordingly. More incompleteness, more not yet, more almost. Forbidden metaphysics demands the logically defying, ego-threatening, deeply uncomfortable leap of feeling complete now. Not because your circumstances warrant it, not because the evidence supports it, but because you understand that the feeling of completeness is not the reward that follows the manifestation. It is the cause that precedes it. The pregnant woman does not feel like a mother after the baby arrives. She feels like a mother the moment she knows the child is there. She prepares the room. She changes her diet. She speaks differently, moves differently, plans differently, all from the state of already being what she is becoming. That is not delusion. That is the precise, technically correct application of how consciousness generates reality. Live from the end. Inhabit the feeling of your desire fulfilled, not as a visualization exercise performed twice a day, but as the background frequency of your waking life. Let it become so familiar, so habitual, so unremarkable, that your nervous system stops treating it as a fantasy and begins treating it as home. What the mind treats as home, reality eventually matches. It has no other option. The law is mechanical. And while you inhabit that state, while you live from that frequency with the active patience of the pregnant woman who knows the birth is coming and is neither anxious nor passive, but deeply, purposefully present, release the how. This is the hardest instruction in the entire codex for the analytical mind, because the analytical mind believes its primary value is in solving the how, in mapping the route, in identifying the mechanism. But the how is the universe's department, not yours. Your department is the what and the who, what you desire and who you are in relation to it. The universe has access to pathways, connections, synchronicities, and arrangements of circumstance that your logical mind, operating from within the limited information of your current position, cannot see or predict. Every time you insist on a specific how, it has to come through this promotion, this person, this opportunity. You are narrowing the infinite creative intelligence of the field to a single channel. You are turning a floodgate into a pinhole. Release the how. Decree the what with absolute certainty. Inhabit the who with total commitment. And then step back and watch the universe solve the logistics with an elegance and creativity that will consistently exceed whatever solution your planning mind would have constructed. Now we must speak of what the system fears most. You will understand that the energy feeding the matrix of limitation is not generated by external forces imposing themselves upon you. It is generated by you, voluntarily, through your unexamined reactions, your unquestioned participation, your unconscious consent. The Gnostic texts found at Nag Hammadi, buried in the Egyptian desert in the 4th century, hidden from the burning, preserved for 16 centuries until discovered in 1945, describe a system, not a metaphor for human psychology, but a literal architecture of reality. Autonomous forces, the Archons, that do not create consciousness, but harvest it, that do not generate reality, but manage the conditions under which human creative energy is extracted and redirected. You do not need to take this literally to extract its essential truth. The structures of the world as currently organized are not designed to produce human sovereignty. They are designed to produce human productivity within defined parameters. Your fear keeps you compliant. Your desire keeps you consuming. Your tribal loyalty keeps you predictable. Your guilt keeps you controllable. And the moment you withdraw, the moment you stop reacting, stop consuming unconsciously, stop performing the emotional states that the system requires of you, you become something the system has no protocol for. You become ungovernable. Not through resistance, not through protest, through sovereign indifference, through the radical, quiet, absolutely devastating act of simply not giving your emotional energy to the machinery that requires it. This is why every authentic spiritual tradition across every culture and every century has pointed toward the same internal practice, the cultivation of the witness, the part of you that observes without reacting, that sees without being captured, that feels without being consumed. The witness is not cold. The witness is not detached from life. The witness is the most fully alive part of you. It is the sleeping God with eyes open, and its characteristic quality is not indifference to experience, but freedom within experience. You feel everything. You are moved by beauty. You are troubled by injustice. You love with full intensity. But you are not controlled by any of it. You are the sky, not the weather. The weather is real. The weather changes. But the sky, the vast, open, ungraspable sky remains itself through every storm, every season, every change of light. Become the sky. Revoke your consent to be the weather. And finally, we arrive at the door that the entire system of control, every institution, every ideology, every mechanism of fear and compliance has been built around keeping closed. The door of death. Or rather, the door of what death actually is, stripped of the mythology of terror that has been layered over it for millennia, because a being who does not fear death cannot be controlled. Full stop. A being who knows, not believes, not hopes, but knows with the cellular certainty of direct understanding that consciousness does not end when the body stops, that the observer behind the eyes is not a product of the brain, but the condition that makes the brain possible, that energy is neither created nor destroyed. And consciousness is the most fundamental form of energy. That being has nothing to ultimately lose. And a being with nothing to ultimately lose is the most dangerous, most free, most creative, most fully alive kind of being that exists. Your body is not you. This is the teaching that was encoded in the oldest mystery schools, transmitted through the most carefully guarded initiations, preserved at the cost of lives across thousands of years of systematic suppression. Your body is the diving suit. It is the instrument through which consciousness chose to experience the specific density and texture of third-dimensional physical reality. It is extraordinary technology, complex beyond anything human engineering has yet produced, sensitive beyond any instrument science has yet built, and it deserves care and respect and wonder. But it is not you. You are the one wearing it. You are the diver, not the suit. And when the suit can no longer function in the depths, when the mission is complete, when the material of this particular experience has been fully lived, the diver ascends, takes off the helmet, breathes the open air, and remembers, with a relief so total it cannot be contained in language, that they were never a creature of the depths. They were always a creature of the surface, of the light, of the vast, open, uncontained reality that the density of physical experience temporarily obscured. The work of the Codex, all of it, every principle, every practice, every discipline, has been preparation for this. Not preparation for dying, preparation for living with the freedom of a being who has genuinely, metabolically, operationally released the fear of death. Because that release does not wait for the moment of physical transition to change your life. It changes your life now, today, in the quality of risk you are willing to take, in the depth of love you are willing to feel, in the audacity of the reality you are willing to decree and inhabit, in the willingness to stand in the middle of what everyone around you calls impossible and say with calm, absolute, unshakable certainty, "Watch me." This is where we leave you, not with a summary, not with a list of action steps, not with a gentle reminder to like and subscribe, with a charge. You have received something in these hours that Giordano Bruno was silenced for.
that the Cathars were annihilated for, that the Library of Alexandria was burned to prevent from spreading, not because it is dangerous in the hands of a responsible institution, because it is dangerous in the hands of an individual who actually uses it. Because an individual who actually uses this understanding cannot be governed by fear, cannot be motivated by manufactured scarcity, cannot be controlled by guilt or by the threat of judgment or by the promise of a salvation they already possess. You are that individual now. You cannot unknow what you know. You cannot unsee what you have seen. The veil has been pulled back, and the light coming through the tear is not comfortable. It is demanding. It demands that you stop performing your limitations. It demands that you take the throne of your own existence with both hands and hold it without apology. It demands that you look at the mirror of your life and instead of fighting what you see, change what you are projecting. Mind Rise Audiobooks exists for exactly this moment. The moment after the understanding, when the question becomes not what do I know, but what do I do with what I know? The answer is everything. You do everything differently. You wake up differently. You speak differently. You react, or rather, you choose not to react differently. You hold your attention like the precious, generative, universe-shaping resource it actually is. You guard your words like the decrees they actually are.
You feel your emotions fully and transmute them deliberately into the fuel of your becoming. You inhabit the frequency of your desired reality before a single piece of physical evidence confirms it. You hold the mold steady while the metal of the world slowly, inevitably, fills it. And when the doubt comes, and it will come reliably, persistently, with the familiar voice of every limiting belief that was ever installed in you, you look at it with the quiet authority of someone who has been to the place behind the veil and back, and you say, I see you. I know what you are, and I do not consent. That is the whole practice. That is the entire teaching compressed to its irreducible core. See clearly, decree precisely, feel fully, hold steadily, release completely. The ancestors who transmitted this knowledge, the alchemists, the Gnostics, the Hermetic masters, the mystics who encoded truth in symbol and story and sacred geometry because saying it plainly would have meant death, they are behind you, not as metaphor, as frequency, as the accumulated vibrational legacy of every human being who ever chose sovereignty over comfort, truth over safety, the full, terrifying freedom of the awakened creator over the warm, familiar prison of the sleeping creature. They passed the torch through fire. It reached you intact. What you do with it now is the only question that has ever mattered. Go, bend reality. The world is waiting for what only you can build.